In preparing for this, another topic that seemed to come up often with the folks I was talking to was the issue of privacy. One of the primary concerns, I think, around the gathering of world data has to be the privacy of the patients. We need the data to improve medicines, keep patients safe, and obviously improve our trials. But we also have to ensure that we're protecting the privacy of the patients whose data we are reviewing. I'd like to hear from each of you about whether this is going to be a challenge for the industry that we're going to have to deal with, and perhaps if you have any insights into how companies are preparing to deal with issues of patient privacy when gathering this real world data. And Gregg, why don't we go ahead and just start with you? Any thoughts on that, since you are so much involved in this space right now?
Yes. So we take privacy as one of the most serious things here at Seqirus. And so one of the things is that when we get a large data set, we take in delinking any type of identifiers. So my electronic medical records may be part of that 50 million, but nobody will be able to go back and say, oh, here's his address or this and that. So all the names have been taken out, and the identifiers will know that I come from the mid-Atlantic area or that I'm a white male and those sensitive things. But because we're looking at large populations, then it's a little bit easier for us. And I'd love to hear from my colleagues on the panel here, but when you're in a rare disease and there's so few, I'm sure that there are other issues that they have to deal with. But right now, we want large data sets so that we can actually be able to tell whether our vaccine is scientifically differentiated. We have 9 influenza vaccines licensed in the United States. Seqirus manufactures 3 of those. We want to see if ours is the same, better, and heaven forbid, worse. So that's why we do our real world evidence, is to scientifically differentiate our influenza vaccine.
Great. And Ranga, any thoughts that you want to share about privacy?
Yeah, so the HIPAA compliance, I think, is probably the most important, and we all strive to maintain that. And as we start expanding on the data sources, it is, there is more reason for us to be cautious on how those data is procured. And just to give you a quick example of something that we are exploring, because of the rare disease space that we are in the severe genotypic patients, the caregivers constitute a very significant component of support for the patient. And so, engaging the right partners to establish validated tools, electronic tools, and data collection activities, where where we can depend upon the caregiver to actually provide additional information rather than the patient in support of data collection for the clinical trial, especially given that the agency is putting a lot of emphasis on the quality of life equation in the drug approval process. Working with these kind of technologies and vendors to ensure that not only there is a privacy component, but also on the other side of the equation, ensuring that we are getting the data that we need is a significant portion of our activities in the planning phases of this trial.
And Christoph, I think you heard Gregg mention some of the things they're doing at Seqirus around privacy. Anything you can share from within Otsuka about concerns that you have for privacy and what can be done to make sure we're respecting that?
I think it has to be absolutely clear that patient privacy and confidentiality is absolutely key here. Yeah, and I would actually like to build a little bit on something that Gregg already introduced. And that is the fact that I already alluded to, the fact that it is going to be important to, for example, in the US healthcare system, to connect different data sets. But of course, I can only do that by anonymizing patient data. The other connection that I think is going to be increasingly important is the connection, for example, between a patient that has been part of a randomized controlled clinical trial and then enters the real world, but to some extent, I actually want to follow up that patient in a real world as well. Both of that situations have to make sure that I do that while ensuring complete patient confidentiality. The way we're going to do this is by using, and Gregg started to explain that already, is this what we call tokenization. Now, where we basically, on the one hand, identifiers that are based on the region, gender, yeah, and enables us to follow patients through different data sets, while on the other hand, makes it completely impossible to identify a patient based on this. Doing this is going to be key if we really want to ensure the completeness of the data, the completeness of the observation, for example, that we want to do while obtaining real-world data.
Okay, and I'm just going to stick with you for one other second. Camila just asked a question regarding this topic. She said, do you use data tokenization to ensure privacy? I'll be honest with you and tell you I'm not sure exactly what that means, but do you use data tokenization? And if so, do you know or have you heard any experiences with that compared to other methods? Is that something you're able to touch on?
So we have not used tokenization yet. We are, however, looking into the possibility of utilizing tokenization to overcome these two different situations that I have explained. Yeah, and that's actually, for example, one reason why we decided we can't do this on our own, but we need to work with partners that have more experience in that space. Yeah, so I can't give you a concrete example out of our activities where we have used it, but we do think that tokenization is something that we want to use and will use in the future. And we do think that tokenization enables us to ensure patient privacy and patient confidentiality.